Good evening. It's a little bit too late to read, but I don't like to wake up tomorrow sleepy and read about it. It's almost 10:30. So let's try to finish. It's Saturday evening. I have lowered the speakers a bit to level 40. Yes, but this is super long and I've not remembered. I have to read it one more time in the future. But probably I'll not do that because this is very long.
Seaweed, like mushrooms, can also grow in low-light conditions. Dandelions and tree needles could provide vitamin C, and bacteria could provide vitamin E. More conventional cold weather crops such as potatoes might get sufficient sunlight at the equator to remain feasible. 214. Large-scale food stockpiling. To feed portions of civilization through a nuclear winter, large stockpiles of food storage prior to the event would have to be accomplished. Such stockpiles should be placed underground, at higher elevations and near the equator to mitigate high-altitude UV and radioactive isotopes. Stockpiles should also be placed near populations most likely to survive the initial catastrophe. One consideration is who would sponsor their stockpiling. There may be a mismatch between those most able to sponsor the stockpiles, i.e., the pre-catastrophe wealthy, and those most able to use the stockpiles, the pre-catastrophe rural poor. 215. Feminine annual global wheat storage is approximately 2 months. 216. Climate engineering. Despite the name nuclear winter, nuclear events are not necessary to produce the modeled climatis effect. 1731. In an effort to find a quick and cheap solution to the global warming projection of at least 2°C of surface warming as a result of the doubling in CO2 levels within the atmosphere, through solar radiation management, a form of climate engineering, the underlying nuclear winter effect has been looked at as perhaps holding potential. Besides the more common suggestion to inject sulfur compounds into the stratosphere to approximate the effects of a volcanic winter, the injection of other chemical species such as release of a particular type of soot particle to create minor nuclear winter conditions, has been proposed by Paul Crutzen and others. 217. 218. According to the threshold nuclear winter computer models, 314, if 1 to 5 teragrams of firestorm-generated soot, 30, is injected into the low stratosphere, ITIS, modeled, through the anti-greenhouse effect, to heat the stratosphere but cool the lower troposphere and produce 1.25 degrees Celsius cooling for 2 to 3 years, and after 10 years, average global temperatures would still 0.5 degrees Celsius lower than before the soot injection. 14. Potential climatic precedents. Similar climatic effects to nuclear winter followed historical supervolcano eruptions, which plumed sulfate aerosols high into the stratosphere, with this being known as a volcanic winter. 222. The effects of smoke in the atmosphere, short-wave absorption, are sometimes termed an anti-greenhouse effect, and a strong analog is the hazy atmosphere of Titan. Pollock, Toon and others were involved in developing models of Titan's climate in the late 1980s, at the same time as their early nuclear winter studies. 223. Similarly, extinction-level comet and asteroid impacts are also believed to have generated impact winters with pulverization of massive amounts of fine rock dust. This pulverized rock can also produce volcanic winter effects, if sulfate-bearing rock is hit in the impact and lofted high into the air. 224, and nuclear winter effects, with the heat of the heavier rock ejecta igniting regional and possibly even global forest firestorms. 225, 226. This global impact firestorms hypothesis, initially supported by Wendy Wolbach, H.J. Mellish and Owen Toon, suggests that as a result of massive impact events, the small sand grain-sized ejecta fragments created can meteorically re-enter the atmosphere, forming a hot blanket of global debris high in the air, potentially turning the entire sky red-hot for minutes to hours, and with that, burning the complete global inventory of above-ground carbonaceous material, including rainforests. 227, 228. This hypothesis is an animation depicting a massive asteroid Earth impact and subsequent impact crater formation. The asteroid connected with the extinction of the Cretaceous Paleogen extinction event released an estimated energy of 100 tritons of TNT, 420 Zj. 219. Corresponding to 100 million Mount energy, roughly 10,000 times the maximum combined arsenals of the US and Soviet Union in the Cold War. 220. This is hypothesized to have produced sufficient ground energy coupling to have caused Severian mantle plume, volcanism. At antipodal point, the opposite city of the world. 221. Suggested as a means to explain the severity of the Cretaceous Paleogen extinction event, as the Earth impact of an asteroid about 10 km wide which precipitated the extinction is not regarded as sufficiently energetic to have caused the level of extinction from the initial impact's energy release alone. The global firestorm winter, however, has been questioned in more recent years. 2003, 2013, by Claire Belcher. 227, 229, 230, Tamara Goldin. 231, 232, 233, and Mellish, who had initially supported the hypothesis. 234, 235, with this re-evaluation being dubbed the Cretaceous Paleogen firestorm debate by Belcher. 227. Depending on the size of the meteor, it will either burn up high in the atmosphere or reach lower levels and explode in an airburst akin to the Chelyabinsk meteor of 2013, which approximated the thermal effects of a nuclear explosion. The issues raised by the scientists in the debate are if perceived low quantity of soot in the sediment beside the fine-grained iridium-rich asteroid dust layer, if the quantity of re-entering ejecta was perfectly global in blanketing the atmosphere, and if so, the duration and profile of the re-entry heating, whether it was a high thermal pulse of heat or the more prolonged and therefore more incendiary oven heating. 234, and finally, how much the self-shielding effect from first wave of now-cooled meteors in dark flight contributed to diminishing the total heat experienced on the ground from later waves of meteors. 227, in part due to the Cretaceous period being a high atmospheric oxygen era, with concentrations above half the present day. Owen Toon et al. In 2013 were critical of the re-evaluations the hypothesis is undergoing. 228. It is difficult to successfully ascertain the percentage contribution of the soot in this period's geological sediment record from living plants and fossil fuels present at the time. 236. In much the same manner, the fraction of the material ignited directly by the meteor impact is difficult to determine. See also 1883 eruption of Krakatoa. which caused approximately 1 Kelvin of global cooling for 2 years due to sulfate emissions. Dalton minimum, 1790 to 1830, a period of prolonged solar minimum activity, resulting in Earth receiving lower insolation values. Doomsday device. Global dimming, global reduction in ground insolation, due to the atmospheric injection of aerosols from various sources. Impact winter. Naki, 1783 eruption of an Icelandic volcano which produced continentally localized cooling for 1-2 years. List of states with nuclear weapons. Little Ice Age, a period of low temperatures from the 16th to the 19th centuries partially overlapping with the Maunder minimum of solar activity, 1645 to 1715. Nuclear famine. Nuclear holocaust. Nuclear terrorism. Toba catastrophe theory, a controversial hypothesis that a volcanic winter produced by the eruption of a volcano in Toba, Indonesia, created a human population bottleneck approximately 80,000 years ago. Volcanic winter. Year without a summer, 1816, created by a volcanic eruption in Tambora. Younger Dryas impact hypothesis, a controversial hypothesis that an impact event and fires triggered the last ice age. Documentaries. On the Eighth Day Nuclear Winter documentary, 1984, filmed by the BBC and available on internet video hosting websites, chronicles the rise of the hypothesis, with lengthy interviews of the prominent scientists who published the nascent papers on the subject. 237. Media. The Cold and the Dark, The World After Nuclear War, a book co-authored by Carl Sagan in 1984 which followed his co-authoring of the TOPS study in 1983. Threads, a 1984 docudrama that Carl Sagan assisted in an advisory capacity. This film was first of its kind to depict a nuclear winter. A Path Where No Man Thought, Nuclear Winter and the End of the Arms Race, a book authored by Richard P. Turco and Carl Sagan, published in 1990. It explains the nuclear winter hypothesis and, with that, advocates nuclear disarmament. 238. Nuclear Winter is a mini-documentary by Retro Report that looks at nuclear winter fears in today's world. Explanatory notes. Tom. Partially overlapping with the Tom.